Now, with Brian Wilson live in Charlotte, this is Common Sense coverage of the Democratic National Convention with Brian and Brian, sponsored by the Media Research Center. 105.9 FM and AM 630. WMAL.
Morning, it is 36 minutes past the hour. Brian Wilson in Charlotte. Brian Neiman back home. He's on baby watch, and we're waiting for good news any moment now. I am joined here in Charlotte as the Democrats kick off things today by Congressman Chris Van Hollen, Democrat from Maryland, a member of the Budget Committee. He's the ranking member on the Budget Committee. Congressman, how are you? I need you to...
It's in advance.
Yeah, pull that mic a little bit closer.
Okay. Is that better?
That's much better.
Okay.
Thank you very much. So, Congressman, as you kick off the whole thing here today, what is it that at the end of the week you want people to walk away with? What's the takeaway that you hope for those voters who've not yet made up their mind?
The takeaway is the choice about the future. What direction are we going to go? And if you look at the Romney-Ryan plan and you compare it to the president's plan, they're very different because what the president is saying is that we have to take a balanced approach to long-term deficit reduction. We need to make some tough cuts to build an economy that's built to last. But we also need to ask folks at the very highest end of the income ladder to chip in a little bit more to reduce the deficit. Because if you don't ask a penny more from folks at the very top, you hit everybody else a lot harder. That's simple math. And it means you hit folks on Medicare, you hit students in terms of reducing our investment in Pell Grants and student loans. So we have a very big choice for the country. Are we all in this together, or is everybody going it alone?
Republicans hit very hard on this idea that, well, the president said you didn't build that. Now, I know Democrats say that was taken out of context, and they quibble with that. But it seems to me in the last day or so there's been a recognition by some Democrats that, you know what, this is a perception we have to deal with. How do you deal with it?
Well, you've got to deal with it by making it clear exactly what the president meant, and I'm sure the president will make that very clear at this convention. The president has said over and over that the secret to our economic success has been based on two things. First of all, entrepreneurial free spirits, people who are innovative, people who are going out and making the economy work. But he's also made the point that we need to invest in our kids' education. We need to make sure we have infrastructure, roads, bridges, highways, also the infrastructure of the 21st century, which is also what has made the United States a great economic power. And if you don't have those important public investments, the United States would not have become the economic powerhouse we are. So it's our unique ability to allow free people to make their own way, but it's also combined with these very important national investments we've made.
My colleague Brian Neiman is in D.C. has a question for you.
Well, Congressman, you mentioned a balanced approach to the budget. I'm just curious, do we even know what the budget proposal is from the Democrats? And I'm curious as to when the budget would be balanced under a Democratic control. I mean, what is your sense of when you could actually have a balanced budget, and how important do you think that is?
Well, first of all, the president has submitted a budget to the Congress. He presented a long-term deficit plan a year ago in September. He presented again as part of his budget submission to the Congress. As I said, it takes this balanced approach. It combines lots of tough cuts, but it combines that with asking folks at the very top to chip in more. And the reality is, if you look at the president's budget over the 10-year window, it significantly reduces the deficit. And the key factor here is as a percent of the economy. In other words, if you can make sure that your government spending is lower as a percent than the growth of the economy, then you stabilize it. And that's what the president has done in his budget.
Congressman, when Congress passes a law and it gets signed into law by a president, it becomes the law of the land. You as a member of Congress sort of expect that law is going to be enforced, don't you?
I sure do.
Well, many people look at the situation with immigration and they say that what the Obama administration has done with immigration is they have decided that the law of the land, passed by Congress, signed into law by previous presidents, they don't like part of that law, so they choose not to enforce it. What do you say to people that say the current immigration policies of the Obama administration basically are ignoring the laws that are on the books?
They're not ignoring the laws. What the president has done and what he said is that when you've got the resources of law enforcement, you should prioritize the people who are absolutely the worst offenders. So if you're not only here illegally and undocumented, but if you've also violated the laws of the United States, let's prioritize those people. Let's not prioritize the kid who was brought here when they were 2 years old, who has graduated from high school with a diploma and done very well, because just like everything in life, you've got to target your resources. The Immigration Service doesn't have unlimited resources, so if you have to choose between going after a guy who's been a lawbreaker or a gang member or someone who has graduated at the top of their class, you should go after the lawbreakers.
And to those members of the Border Patrol who filed suit saying, well, basically we're not allowed to do what we were sworn to do, which is uphold the law of the land because of these policies, what would you say?
Well, I'd say that's not the case because, again, they were sworn to make sure that we go after the immigration abuse, and when you've got limited resources, I would think they would agree that we should go after the really bad guys first. And what the president has said, he's just said temporarily, until we can bring more resources to bear or until we have comprehensive immigration reform, let's focus on the really bad actors.
But if that's so easy to do, why not just pass the law? Why not work with Marco Rubio and actually get it into law so it's there and people can, follow what the law actually says instead of working around it?
Well, again, what the president has said, just like any executive has the right to do, is here's how we're going to use our limited resources. So he is using limited resources to implement the law by targeting and focusing on the very worst offenders. That seems to be common sense. Now, in terms of working with Rubio, listen, this is kind of a crazy argument the Republicans make. The House of Representatives passed, when the Democrats were in control, the DREAM Act, okay, which would allow these kids who'd come here 1 or 2 years old through no fault of their own to be able to become legal here, The Republicans in the Senate voted against it. Almost every Republican in the House except for a few voted against it. So they have voted against the DREAM Act, and now they're turning around and say, oh, why don't you work with us, Mr. President, to pass the DREAM Act? They've just shown, and Mitt Romney, he said he'd veto the bill. So, this is kind of a strange argument I hear from the other side.
You are playing Joe Biden in the mock debates.
Or play Paul Ryan.
Paul Ryan for Joe Biden. I'm sorry, excuse me. You're playing Paul Ryan for Joe Biden in the mock debate. Have you started that process yet?
Well, we've had a preliminary get-together, but we haven't gotten to the full swing of things yet.
So when does that happen? Just in the timing of things.
Well, it will begin in earnest after the convention, and then, of course, in the immediate lead up to the debates.
And based on your initial meeting, how you feel that's going to go?
Well, look, the vice president is very familiar with all these issues. He's familiar with the budget issues because he was in the Congress, but even more recently, of course, he headed what was called the Biden Group that tried to get people together to focus on that. Of course, he has a long time interest and focus on national security and foreign affairs. So, look, I know how Paul Ryan presents these arguments, so I hope I can be of some use to the vice president in that regard.
There's also been a little bit of a controversy from Governor O'Malley, who said that when asked, are we better off than we were 4 years ago, he initially said no, and then later changed his answer to say, well, yes, we are better off, but we still got a lot of work to do because we're still digging ourselves out of what the Bush administration. At some point, do you have to take ownership of where we are in the economy?
Yeah, and Brian, two things. First of all, we do need to remember that we were in free fall. That was just a reality. And we do need to remember that the president acted quickly through the recovery bill and rescue in the auto industry, and we stopped the free fall and turned the corner. But I agree that the question for this convention is what's next? What are the choices before us? And the point many of us are making is not to say let's go back and rewrite the history. The point is, if you listen to Romney and Ryan, their plan for the future is no different than the policies that got us into the mess. So this is a focus on the future, and I don't think people are going to want to adopt the same recipe that ended up blowing up in our face and tanking the economy.
We'll leave it there. Congressman Van Hollen, thanks very much for your time. We appreciate it.